Hi, I wanted to welcome you to the Divorce Planning Podcast. I'm Carri Goldring, and I'm in the mortgage business, and I do planning pre-divorce for people who are either going to refinance their home, do an equity buyout, or plan to purchase a new home and make sure that everything in the divorce decree is worded properly and the numbers and the planning is taken care of so that you can go through the underwriting process smoothly. And I would like to introduce you to other people who are interested in the divorce planning process so you can get a real education of what's involved. Hope you enjoy.
Hi, today I have a very special guest with me who's someone that I did a mortgage for while they were going through the divorce process. And I am lucky enough to have them come talk and kind of just give some perspective from the client point of view. So, Cate, thank you and welcome to being with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
I appreciate it. One topic that always comes up, and I'm curious how it was from your perspective, is you're pretty used to in a divorce arena having a divorce attorney. Bringing in a financial person always seems to make sense.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need a emotional coach kind of person, and that usually makes sense. But when someone says certified divorce mortgage professional, I think I still get a lot of what? So
Mm,
I'm kind of curious how it was brought up to you, what if you had that same kind of thought, and then how things changed as you and I started working together.
I had already sort of had the idea soft launched to me because a friend of mine who was also going through a divorce, but was earlier or kind of further in the process than I was, had already worked with you. So I'd already heard your
Oh,
name.
perfect.
And yeah, I was already familiar, at least had like a passing familiarity with this idea. So then about a couple weeks later, when the divorce coach brought up, said like, "Well, have you work with Carrie on figuring out your mortgage, and it'll be great." It was already kind of there had already been a seed planted that this is something that requires a specialist. Um, and I think because of my professional background, um, being a social worker, being a clinician, having specialties myself, the idea of working with a specialist is it's I'm pretty comfortable with it and it makes a lot of sense. So while I had never heard specifically about divorce mortgage lending prior to getting divorced, the idea that there would be a specialization in that area seemed like, well, that makes sense. There's a lot of moving pieces in a divorce. There's a lot of moving pieces legally, financially, emotionally. Um, and so just the idea that somebody would take the time to really learn how do you navigate all those moving pieces and how do you navigate them creatively and flexibly and how do you make sure that they're all working together as smoothly as possible just made a lot of sense to me. And then like just kind of as an impression. And then I remember the first phone call that we had when my attorney said, yes, now you can finally call Carrie. Because I'd been asking for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Aw.
Um, yeah, she it like I that conversation, I was like, it just really confirmed everything I had already sort of like suspected. Like, okay, yes, this does require specialty knowledge. And you just sounded like I could tell you were a specialist and an expert because all these things you were saying that to me sounded so new and so foreign, you were totally comfortable with. You could explain in clear, plain language that I could understand, even though I'm not an expert at all. And there were just a lot of things that to me seemed like, so you probably haven't heard of this. And you were like, yeah, no, I deal with that every day. And your comfortableness and your confidence with it really assured me like, yes, this is the route to go.
Oh, good.
This requires a specialist.
Oh, good. I don't know
Yeah.
that I realized that someone else had told you about me beforehand. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
nice. That was nice to hear. So that was great. And so doing the mortgage part, obviously it was a little more involved than you just saying, I want to keep my house, I need to refinance.
Yes.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So, I wanted to keep my house and I needed to refinance. But then I also needed to I needed to buy out my ex from his share of the equity. So that is, and it's different from I think you called it a divorce equity buyout, and that being different from just a regular refinance with equity loan.
Cash out.
Um, Yes, a cash out refi. And the way that you explained like how that was different and why that was different made a lot of sense to me. There was a lot of important stuff to do with timing related to, when exactly are we getting divorced? And then of course, like there were portions, like kind of milestones that we had to hit in the lending process that were eventually written into the divorce agreement. So, it was more complicated because it was more complicated than my prior experiences, like getting a mortgage, getting a refi, because there's just so much more documentation involved. It was my first time getting a mortgage on my own instead of with a partner. Um, and there were just a lot more things I had to explain to the lender that you and Kara were so helpful with,
Okay.
and made it so easy. Like because I mean I was just like in fight or flight 24/7, and could not think at all. And so when you would say we're going to need to explain this, my little brain would just like panic, like I don't even know where to begin. And you're like, I've already written the letter. It's in your portal. Just go in and sign it. And it was so easy because it was so complex, but the ways that you and Kira like shepherded me through it made it feel so clear. So I think there were probably a lot of things that for me now are a blur, but at the time were also a blur. But it was like I could tell that you guys were so familiar with how specialized this kind of buyout is, because I needed to not just take out the loan to cover the cost of the house, but also to cover the amount I had to buy out my ex for his share of the equity. Um,
Right.
and I had to do it on my own. And then I had to do it, my income is based on 4 jobs. And so that added this like additional layer of complexity that you were really creative and helpful in navigating.
Oh,
Um,
good. Oh, good.
yeah.
And I know we talked to the soon to be ex also to make sure they get the paperwork signed and
You were so helpful with that because at that point I didn't want to say anything at all. Like
right.
and everything, because everything's a fight, when nobody is their best selves when they're getting divorced. And so I think even if it's an amicable divorce, which mine was not, I think still there's so much tension at that point. Like there's so much like fear and hurt and whatever. So having you be the person who's like, you don't have to ask him for anything. I've already got this taken care of. I'll FedEx him a pen if he needs a pen to sign the paperwork.
I
Just
remember
made
that
it
now that you said that. He was so funny because everything was so difficult for him
every
to do it.
yes.
And he's like, I don't have a printer. I don't have a pen. I'm
Hmm.
like, all right,
And
I'll send you paper. I'll send you a pen.
right, no problem. You need a hand, I've got a hand for you. Like, it'll be over by 8 o'clock. You made it so easy. And it was I think that was something that I think, again, like a divorce lending specialist, like you have that expert knowledge of understanding all the emotional components and how all those emotional components can complicate the process even further. And so
Right.
you already have strategies ready to go to address them. Whereas I don't think somebody who does this all the time would anticipate or understand that. They'd be like, well, we'll just wait for him to print it. And it's like, you have to understand, he does
Not
not want to
me.
print it.
Right.
He doesn't want it printed. And you were like, yep, I already know. That's why I've already printed and FedExed it over. So you have that knowledge of how the emotional can intersect and complicate the process. So you've got the strategies ready to go. And it was just like, it was just such a relief to me to not have to be the person who was making that happen.
Oh,
Um,
good.
yeah, yeah,
I'm glad you have an amazing way of explaining things. And I'm sure that's partly because of your job,
yes,
but
probably.
Yeah, but you're really good with articulating
Mm,
everything, which is so nice. And then even though you were going through like a very stressful time, and like you said, you probably weren't your best self, you and I became pretty close throughout
yes,
the
yes,
throughout the process. We like became
yes,
friends out of
yes,
the whole
yes.
thing.
Which was like so, I mean, it was so comforting and also like so normalizing, like when we could just like have a normal conversation about our kids or the holidays or like, just commiserating. Like when you were like, yep, I've also been divorced. I've also been there. I know what this is like. Like when you're in the middle of a crisis like that, like, intellectually you're going to get through it, but it's also impossible to believe that you really are not always going to feel that way forever. And like you just assured me so much, like you're gonna move on, you're gonna move forward. Life is not always gonna be a crisis. Um, there might be new crises, but it's not always gonna be this one.
Right. And you'll handle them better the more you have, right?
Yes, exactly. And it was so assuring. And I think like that was also like that piece of feeling like connected really made a difference too. Like not just in terms of the mortgage process. I think definitely it made me feel like affirmed in my decision to put so much trust in you, but it also just like emotionally made it easier to get through like one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, and you did great throughout the process.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you would want to give advice to other people who are either contemplating divorce or are afraid to make that initial phone call to me or to anyone else, or to talk
I
about the collaborative process at all that you went through?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I guess a couple of things. Like I think if you're thinking about it, it doesn't hurt to get information. That's something I just believe across the board. It never hurts to get information. So if divorce is something you're thinking about, but you're like, but how would this work and how would that work? You don't have to figure it out on your own. Like that's the great thing about professionals is that you don't have to figure out like how am I going to navigate like a complex legal system, financial system, mortgage system. Like there are professionals who know how to do that. So let them help you, give them a call. I thought collaborative. So I did collaborative with my attorney was Ruth Goldner. And Ruth was just so exceptional in terms of how the counsel she gave me was so sound at every point. She was so emotionally responsive, so creative, so flexible. And she worked so well at organizing all the other professionals on the team.
He's
And
really a
then Jordana,
superstar.
she's a superstar and such an advocate for her clients and also like very realistic. Like we'll be sympathetic, but we'll be like, I know you don't want to hear this, and this is also just how it has to be. Which you need sometimes. You need that reality check. She
Right.
spent so much time just talking me through things because I'm the kind of person who does expect myself, like, well, if I'm gonna do this, I need to learn everything about it. But that's just not possible. I can't go through 3 years of law school and become a divorce expert. I needed her and she offered that expertise and talked me through it. Jordana Wolfson, who is a divorce coach who sent me your way, another person who just, she's also a clinical social worker, but everything she does is about divorce coaching, facilitation, co-parenting. And so things that to me seemed like, how are we ever going to get through this? She just had a process and it was clear. She's very intuitive. She's very empathic. She can
Another
explain things.
superstar for sure.
Yes, it can just the way she is able to build rapport with both people in the divorcing couple without alienating the other is like just as a fellow clinician, I was like, damn, that's amazing. Like it's truly
Everybody has
impressive.
their own special talent, right?
Yes, and she really has a knack for it. And just another person who worked so well with all the other professionals on the team. And then when you came onto the team, I like it felt like another like advocate, like another person who was picking up another piece where I was again like totally overwhelmed. Where do I even start? Money freaks me out. And you made it all just feel really clear. Like I felt like you just held my hand through every step of the process. And even when I was like panicking, you were like talking me down and like, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna figure it out. So my advice is like, utilize these professionals. Like we live in a major metropolitan area and we are so fortunate to have so many different professionals who are so good at what they do. And so something that seems really complex and overwhelming to you is like what they do every day. And even when it is complex and overwhelming, it's not the same for them. Like it's not the same for you because it doesn't have that emotional piece. And also it's like, oh, this is an extra challenging puzzle, but we can figure this out because I know how to do these puzzles.
Right.
Um, so make the calls. Don't think you can do it by yourself. Don't require yourself to do it by yourself. Um, and just make sure you have a really good team to like support you through this process.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you too, because I know there's always two attorneys on the collaborative side.
Yeah.
And I have to imagine that the other attorney, you didn't feel like it was someone you were fighting with or
Yeah, the other attorney, who's Marie Pulte, when you're in that kind of situation where you feel like your back's against the wall and you're fighting for your life, you're like I was like, I know intellectually this is a really wonderful, sound professional person, and she's being really great and actually really helpful to this process. But right now, I don't like her at all. Um, but it's like it's an emotional reaction, and I knew I was like, this, of course, you wouldn't like anybody who is on your ex's side right now because and I know like her job is to advocate for him. That is her professional duty. Um and I insisted he had his own attorney. I'm really glad that he picked her. I think she did a great job working with the rest of the team. And now like on the other side of it, I'm like Marie's great. I would refer people to her as well. Just I don't think anybody gets through a divorce actually liking their spouse's attorney while they're in the divorce process.
right, right.
But the
But you're
the
happy
reality,
that they don't like pick fights and like
oh
that
my
they're not
gosh.
like picking out little things where they could press your buttons, that it's just all done in a very nice, respectful way.
And yeah, it is respectful. And even when there were times where I thought like that was happening, it was like Ruth was really good at pointing out to me, like, that's actually not what's happening. If it was what was happening, this is what she would do instead. And then I was like, oh, okay. Because again, when you're in that fight or flight mode, so many things seem like a threat. But it like, and looking back on it now, I'm like, obviously that was not a threat. Obviously that was her professional obligation. That was her due diligence. And frankly, I like her and Ruth, like the collaborative process only works well if the entire team is working well together. Our
You had a
process,
great team. You were really lucky to have
yeah,
Marie and Ruth and Jordana together because they are all such powerful, wonderful women, you know.
yes. And Julie Quick was our financial neutral
Julie
and
is amazing too.
lived up to her name, like so quick, so responsive.
And she's
And
sharp, right? She's really sharp.
sharp. So, and like and then you're part of the team, like not officially in the collaborative meetings, but you had meetings with like me and Julie to talk about, kind of the bigger piece of the puzzle. I know that you were talking with Ruth at different points to like figure out timing coordination. So you worked really well as like an auxiliary collaborative team professional. Um, and yeah, it's I at the time I felt like the divorce was going very, very slowly, but actually from the time I told him we are done to the time the judgment was entered, it was 6 months and 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very quick.
It really was very quick. And of course, collaborative, we have a minor child. But with so typically there would be a 6 month waiting period from when you file to when judgment can be entered. But with collaborative, you're filing a joint petition. And so part of that is you can ask for that waiting period to be waived because you've already worked out the parenting time agreement and spousal and child support and all of that with Jordana instead of with a judge, so with a licensed mental health professional who does this all day long. So it makes it a lot quicker, which like just makes it so much easier to do what you want to do, which is move on with your life. Like you want to like let the wound heal and start to move on. You want it to heal for you, you want it to heal for your children, and you just want to start rebuilding. And the collaborative process really allowed that to happen. I
Yeah.
unfortunately am the kind of person where like once I decide I'm doing something, I want it to already be done. Like I will hem and haw for years, and then once I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm like, so it should be over now. Like we should be done. So it felt like it was taking forever, but it was actually incredibly quick.
Yeah,
Um,
it is very, very quick. And you brought up a good point too, because a lot of people think when you do collaborative divorce that you and your spouse have to be collaborative, but you do not. You just, the team needs to be collaborative.
Yeah, well, and that was why we were getting divorced. There was no way to collaborate. Like we
Mhm.
tried for 13 years. It was not possible. And but the team, the whole team of professionals, including you, worked really well to be creative about how can we minimize the conflict and optimize compromise, collaboration, negotiation. How can we remind both of you that nobody is going to be happy with the outcome of this? Both of you are going to feel like you're losing more than you're getting.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's going to be over and you're going to be able to move on and start, kind of rebuild the next chapter of your life. And that's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth whatever you are giving up. Um, so yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
highly recommend collaborative. Highly recommend working with a really strong professional team, including the divorce lending specialist.
You're great. And I agree. If someone can do it, I just think it gives you a much better outcome on how
Yeah,
to co-parent, how to take care of post-divorce issues, way better than fighting and tearing everything apart and wasting all this
yeah.
money.
Well, when you do it collaboratively, you're working really closely with, again, a team of experts who have subject matter expertise, but they also become experts on you and what went wrong in your marriage and, kind of what is your conflict style like and how do you respond to stress? Like I'm a crier. Like as soon as there was one meeting where I just like started like panicking, like 5 minutes in, just like broke down, hyperventilating, and everyone was like, cool, we're going into breakout rooms. like, and from
Right,
then on, it was like, we're just gonna start in breakout rooms. Like, that's okay. So they don't just get to know, they don't just know the process and the law, they also know who you are. And then they can use strategies that make it less it's still an ordeal. Divorce is always an ordeal, but I can't imagine if I had to just like every 3 months go and talk in front of a judge and it's like maybe two things get worked out but not really like
right.
it
And
would be
have someone
excruciating.
constantly pick on you and pick
Yes,
fights and hit all your
yes.
buttons and
Yes, and somebody and also like, like our judge was wonderful, but like she doesn't know us because she's got hundreds of people on her docket. And so she's
right,
not going to get to know us in that, specialized way that our team got to know us.
right,
Where so and she just it's not her role to kind of come up with strategies to mitigate those conflicts the way the
right.
collaborative team does. So yeah, I can't recommend it highly enough.
That's good. I'm glad. It's like weird to say that you were happy with the process, but I'm glad that you were happy with the
Yes.
process. And when all is said and done, obviously you survived and you came out fine and you got to keep
Yeah.
your house and
I got to keep my house. And I remember when I decided, like, and again, it had been years. When I decided, I remember texting my best friend and I said, do you think if I get divorced, I'll get to keep the house? Um, because my two big things was like, my kid being okay. Um, and I want to keep my house. I love my house. It's very special to me in a lot of ways. And like she's like, yes, you will. Which she didn't know, but
right,
because I think because I worked with such a thoughtful, creative team of experts, that was possible. And so I like every time and it's just it's just a little bungalow. Like it's just a, like shabby chic little bungalow on a major street. But I love it. And every time I'm like vacuuming, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so grateful I get to still be here.
That's
Like
awesome.
truly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time and being willing to share. I know it's a hard thing to do,
Feel
and
safe with you. So
I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you so much. I like truly like when I have those vacuuming moments, I'm like, thank you God for Carrie. Like, thank you God for Jordana. Thank you for Ruth. Like, yeah, I feel so fortunate. So thank you.
I'm glad.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm Carri Goldring, and if you ever have any questions regarding mortgage, feel free to give me a call or send me a text message, 248-420-4524. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.